Another day, another banger. Today we'll be diving into the original trilogy of the Blade franchise. This will start off with Blade, then move on to Blade 2. After that, we finish off the trilogy with Blade Trinity. Without further ado, make sure to sit back, relax, and as always, enjoy the recap. The story begins in 1967, where we see a woman rushed into the emergency room with severe injuries, clinging to life. The doctors work frantically to save her as she reaches out longingly toward her baby. Flash forward to the present, where we follow a couple wandering through random spots before arriving at a place where a man opens a door for them. Inside, the scene is alive with a wild party atmosphere, with people dancing under flashing lights enjoying the nightlife. As the couple makes their way to the center of the party, the man grows increasingly confused by what's happening around him. Suddenly, blood drips onto him from above. He tastes it, and moments later, sprinklers filled with blood erupt, spraying everyone at the party. Panic sets in as the man realizes he's surrounded by vampires. Before he can react, he's attacked and beaten down, ending up at the feet of a mysterious figure. The party comes to an abrupt halt as Blade arrives, striking fear into the hearts of the vampires. Without hesitation, Blade begins unleashing his fury, shooting and killing vampires left and right with incredible skill and precision. As they try to flee, a group of vampires gathers, daring to challenge him. Blade switches to his blade, effortlessly cutting through his enemies, killing most of them, and making an example of the last one standing, Quinn. Blade questions Quinn, but Quinn rambles incoherently before Blade sets him on fire, burning him alive. As the chaos dies down, Blade surveys the scene. The police arrive to handle the aftermath while Blade, having done his job, exits the scene in style, leaving behind a trail of destruction and fear. Meanwhile, Quinn's burnt body is brought into the hospital, declared dead. Inside the lab, Karen, a doctor, takes notes. Puzzled by the strange cells of the man on her table, Curtis Webb, her colleague and friend, approaches her, asking her to examine the body closely. As they work together, they talk about their past, reminiscing while they assess Quinn's body. Suddenly, the moment is shattered when Quinn awakens, attacking Curtis and biting him. Karen watches in horror as Quinn then turns his attention to her, sinking his teeth into her neck. Just as things seem grim, Blade bursts into the room, delivering a punch to Quinn and forcing him to flee through the window. Karen, now gravely wounded, lies on the floor. Blade hesitates but ultimately decides to help her, despite the risk. He picks her up as police officers rush in, shooting at him. Blade throws Karen through the window and follows, exchanging gunfire with the officers as he escapes. After the chaotic scene, Blade is seen driving through the city with Karen and heading to an abandoned warehouse. Inside, his ally Whistler greets him. Blade asks Whistler to help Karen, who is suffering from the effects of the vampire bite. Whistler, knowing the dangers, warns Blade about the possible side effects of the bite, but he begins treating her anyway. As they talk, Whistler asks about Quinn, eager to take him down. Karen, growing restless due to the bite, struggles, and Blade holds her down to keep her calm. Meanwhile, at a board meeting of high-ranking vampires, the fallout from Blade's rampage is being discussed. The members are furious about the mess caused by the vampire nightclubs. Deacon Frost is called in and reprimanded by the vampire elders for his reckless behavior, which they claim is getting their kind killed. Frost, defiant, challenges their outdated ways and beliefs. Dragonetti, the leader, reminds Frost that he isn't an original vampire and tells him to stay in his place, causing Frost to storm out, visibly angered. Elsewhere, Blade gathers more medicine to help heal Karen and shares a brief heartfelt moment with his trusted friend. As Karen recovers, she begins exploring the warehouse and is intrigued by the collection of weapons scattered around. Meanwhile, Blade and Whistler engage in a private conversation, though Karen overhears parts of it. Suddenly, Blade experiences a seizure when something is placed into his neck, catching Karen's attention. She tries to slip away, but they notice her and cut her off, leading to a confrontation filled with questions. They sit down and explain everything to her, the truth about vampires and Blade's mission as a hunter dedicated to wiping them out. Skeptical, Karen continues to question their story, not fully accepting what she's being told. To prove it, Whistler shows her a special light that can harm vampires. Still unsure, Karen watches as Blade prepares to leave, advising her to stay hidden while he handles his business. Whistler, understanding the danger she's in due to her bite, gives her mace for protection and warns her to buy a gun to use on herself if she starts transforming into a vampire. Meanwhile, in a secret location, Dragonetti meets with Deacon Frost. Furious with Frost's actions, Dragonetti slaps him in anger before storming out, leaving Frost alone with mysterious codes on his computer. Back in the city, Karen is dropped off and starts walking through the streets. She grows paranoid as she notices tattoos on the back of people's necks, like the one Quinn had. Entering an elevator with them, her nerves get the best of her, and she quickly rushes out, but not before realizing they are following her. She pulls out the mace, but when she turns, they've disappeared. Panicking, Karen races back to her apartment and begins packing, only to be startled by a police officer. The officer questions her about her whereabouts the previous night and then suddenly attacks her. Karen fights back, using the mace to subdue him. Before the situation escalates further, Blade arrives and beats the officer mercilessly, smashing him around the apartment. As Karen watches in shock, she notices the familiar tattoo on the officer's neck, confirming he's involved with the vampires. Blade and Karen interrogate the officer, leading them to his car where they discover a hidden blood supply meant for the vampires. However, the officer manages to slip away. Furious, Blade scolds Karen for letting him escape, telling her that if she wants to survive, she must learn how to protect humanity. Some while later, Karen and Blade stake out a place and see the officer taking off in his vehicle. They begin following in hot pursuit until he arrives at a location. They see a mark, meaning a vampire facility is close by. Karen and Blade get ready to storm the place. Approaching, they are stopped by the guard, who is quickly knocked out. Inside the place, we see the vampires enjoying their time whilst Blade starts bashing people and finds the officer. He grabs him, asking him questions about Deacon, attempting to find his hiding spot. Blade tells the cop to deliver a message that hell is coming before making his way through a secret location. The pair enter an elevator and arrive at a place filled with archives and begin looking around. Meanwhile, at a fancy penthouse, Deacon has hosted a party. As we see multiple vampires partying while he continues trying to figure out the code. He makes his way up and the officer tries to explain himself, while we also see Quinn, who is in attendance. The cop is bitten by Deacon and thrown in the pool, left for the dead. Back at the archives facility, Blade sees Pearl, who informs Deacon he is there. Pearl is questioned about the code and angers them, causing Karen to use a light burning his body. He explains a prophecy that they believe in according to Frost, which gives vampires an upper hand. Having enough, Karen burns Pearl to death with the light, making him suffer. After that, they enter another door only to see some kind of hidden history that the vampires believe in. Sensing something, Blade looks around searching and ends up finding a girl. This is a trap, and he is attacked as Quinn arrives with his men trying to bring Blade in. He is outnumbered as they overpower him and Karen. Quinn laughs at Blade, enjoying the moment as they've captured Blade. He is punched but doesn't feel much of Quinn's punches. Quinn then stabs Blade in the shoulder, and Blade begins laughing, showing us something in his ear, to which we see Whistler making quite the entrance. Whistler starts unleashing a parade of bullets as Blade and Karen make a run for it. They start to run, but a train stops them, except a bomb goes off, blowing up the building. Still pursued, Blade is met by Quinn, who begins fighting with him once more. Karen comes to the rescue, giving Blade the upper hand, causing him to run away. They enter the train, escaping the wrath, but Blade is injured as Karen attempts to help him. He injects himself with blood, leading Karen to ponder if he is a vampire. After the chaos, Whistler informs Karen about who Blade really is and that his mother died giving birth to him. He tells her he possesses the same strength as them but isn't affected like they are, as he is different. Whistler tells Karen that vampires killed his family, which is why they're hunted and killed. Checking on Blade, Karen enters his room, talking to him, trying to reassure him he isn't a bad person. Blade explains he is fueled by vengeance for his mother. Meanwhile, Quinn is angry that he failed his mission, telling Deacon it's impossible to get Blade. Coming up with a plan, Deacon kidnaps Dragonetti and makes fun of him by telling him he is in control. He then proceeds to pull out Dragonetti's fangs, stripping him of his pride before he is killed due to the sunlight. After healing, Blade shows Whistler a piece of paper he got from the vampires and tells him to decode it as Karen shows them a medicine she has come up with. The bottle explodes while she tells them it can be used as a weapon. Karen is then told that Whistler has cancer as Blade is injected to regain his strength. Whistler then observes Karen's neck, explaining she doesn't have a lot of time left till she turns. The next morning, Blade walks and notices Deacon. He approaches him, but Frost holds a little girl hostage and tells him to tread carefully. Deacon is impressed about how he is a daywalker and tells Blade to accept himself for who he truly is. Deacon then offers a truce, telling him to join their side, to which Blade refuses and vouches to kill him. He then holds the girl up and threatens him, but Blade quickly fires at him, leading Deacon to throw the girl and run. Meanwhile, Karen attempts to find a cure for herself, as she doesn't want to turn, and tells Whistler it's the only chance she's got. Simultaneously, they're interrupted as a shootout ensues between the group, which leads to Whistler being shot and bashed by Deacon. He stomps on him repeatedly before walking away. Arriving, Blade senses something is wrong and looks around the place, only to uncover a bloodied Whistler. He whispers that Frost has Karen, and that they decoded the disc, explaining he needs Blade's blood to resurrect the prophecy meant for the vampires. Blade is asked by Whistler to kill him, leaving him saddened as he pulls his weapon and hands it to him. With his dying breath, Whistler tells Blade to avenge him, and Blade walks away as Whistler is left behind. Blade then watches a tape where Deacon instructs him to come to a certain location. He then begins to make some sort of serum, meditating, and begins prepping for war. Elsewhere, Deacon confronts Karen and antagonizes her with questions about where her loyalties lie and what she plans to do. Karen boldly fires back, reminding him that he isn't an original vampire, he was merely bitten, which means he holds no real power over her. This enrages Deacon, and he lashes out, warning her that the blood god is coming, and that mankind is doomed once he arrives. Meanwhile, Deacon's men, heavily armed, begin searching the building for Blade. Blade shocks them by appearing suddenly, swiftly eliminating each one of Deacon's men with lethal precision. He moves through the facility, killing vampires with incredible skill, showing once again that he is far above them in combat. As Blade advances, he stumbles upon the same cryptic code but is interrupted when he sees a woman who looks like his mother. Stunned, Blade questions what he's seeing, but before he can fully comprehend it, Deacon and his men attack. Deacon smugly reveals that he was the one who bit Blade's mother, keeping her alive for this very moment. Blade and Karen are taken in a truck, and along the way, they discuss the serum Karen developed. Blade tells her that while it may work, using it will cause him to lose all his abilities. They soon arrive at an ancient vampire temple, where Deacon explains that this is where he will fulfill the prophecy of the Blood God. With Blade's sword in hand, Frost taunts him, playing with the weapon and teasing that Blade should have chosen his side. Blade is taken away while Karen is dragged to a dark abandoned place and pushed into a deep hole. At the bottom, confused and scared, she comes face to face with Curtis, her old friend who has now turned into a vampire. Horrified, Karen fights back, hitting him repeatedly as Curtis screams in anger. Meanwhile, Blade is stripped of his clothes and prepared for the ritual. He's strapped to a wall, and his mother tries to manipulate him, whispering for him to join them as they close him into the wall. Blade's blood begins to drip, triggering the vampire's ritual as they gather, waiting for the Blood God to rise and fulfill their prophecy. Back at the temple, Karen manages to escape Curtis and arrives just in time. As the vampire board members argue among themselves, Deacon's followers kill one of them to maintain control. In the meantime, Karen reaches Blade and manages to unstrap him. Deacon and Quinn laugh, reveling in Blade's suffering as he grows weaker. Seeing no other option, Karen offers her neck to Blade, urging him to bite her so he can regain his strength. Despite the risks, Blade bites her, drinking her blood to restore his power. As Deacon prepares to complete his transformation into an unstoppable force, blood spills over the vampire board members. The ritual is almost finished, and Blade, now fully restored to his powerful form, lets out a fierce roar. Lightning strikes the building, adding to the intensity of the moment. As Blade faces off against his mother, she tries once more to manipulate him, but Blade remains resolute, stabbing her and killing her for good. This act causes the board members to transform into strange mini-vampires that begin flying around Deacon. With his mother now gone, Blade sets his sights on Deacon. He charges forward and swiftly kills Quinn with ease. In a relentless, gangster-like fashion, Blade begins taking out Deacon's men one by one, demonstrating his incredible strength and combat skills. He continues to overpower anyone who dares challenge him, knocking them out and killing them effortlessly. Even when attacked with a weapon, Blade subdues his attacker and ends him without breaking a sweat. Meanwhile, Karen takes on Deacon's partner, shooting at her in a desperate attempt to stop her. In the end, she uses her mace to finish her off. As more vampires try to overwhelm Blade, his thirst for vampire blood is evident, and he continues cutting them down with unrelenting force. Finally, Blade retrieves his sword, setting up the ultimate showdown between him and Deacon. They engage in a fierce sword fight, exchanging blows, each trying to prove their superiority. Blade manages to gain the upper hand, slicing Deacon's body in half. However, Deacon simply laughs, taunting Blade as his body heals and the fight continues. Deacon, now at his full strength, is stabbed in the heart but shakes it off, knocking Blade down. Refusing to give up, Blade gets back on his feet and pulls out his serum. He begins stabbing Deacon with the injections, weakening him. For the final blow, Blade uses the last serum, stabbing Deacon between the eyes and erasing him from existence completely. Victorious, Blade walks away in style. On the rooftop, as the sunlight finally shines through, Blade and Karen talk about their next mission against the vampires. Their work is far from over, and they know more battles lie ahead. Elsewhere, in Moscow, Russia, on a cold, snowy night, a couple walks through the dark streets. Suddenly, the woman is choked by a stranger. But before the situation escalates, Blade appears, confronting the attacker and drawing his sword, ready to fight once again. Blade 2 opens up in the Czech Republic. A man enters a facility and sits down next to another individual. They begin chatting, and it's revealed that they both donate their blood in exchange for money. Shortly after, the man is called in by a woman, who begins asking him questions to determine his eligibility for the donation. As they talk, it becomes clear how secure and highly controlled the facility is. The man Nomak is then led into another room, where he is forcibly restrained and placed in a chair. It's here that the blood doctor, a sinister figure with spikes on his fingers, appears. In an unexpected twist, Nomak breaks free, lunges at the woman and kills her. With brutal force, he throws an officer against the wall, easily overpowering him. Nomak then addresses a camera, delivering a chilling message before turning on the doctor, killing him as well. Meanwhile, Blade begins narrating, explaining how he is a daywalker, able to move between the human and vampire worlds. As he speaks, flashbacks of Whistler's past surface, reminding us that Whistler has now become the very thing he despises. The scene shifts to Blade, fully geared up, strapping on his weapons as he prepares for the battles to come. In the present, Blade is in hot pursuit of a group of vampires, shooting at them as they flee. As they try to escape on their motorcycles, Blade moves swiftly, firing a bullet that takes down one of them. Seeing the others racing toward him, he quickly throws a silver weapon, causing one vampire to crash. Without missing a beat, Blade leaps onto another, killing him effortlessly. Finally, he corners the last one, questioning him about Whistler's whereabouts before swiftly ending his life. Elsewhere, a group of men are partying until an unexpected knock on the door interrupts them. It's Blade. He bursts in, continuing his relentless hunt by killing the men inside. In the middle of the chaos, he's attacked by more vampires. Using his knives, Blade takes on multiple foes at once, showing off his extraordinary combat skills, stabbing and eliminating each attacker with precision. Blade enters another room where he discovers a man inside a containment tube. He frees the man, revealing that it's Whistler, his old friend. Blade carries Whistler on his shoulders and drives to a secret facility, arriving with him in tow. There, he meets another man, Scud, who questions why Blade didn't finish off Whistler. Blade places Whistler in a chair, trying to talk to him, hoping to bring him back from his tortured state. Blade pulls out a gun from a box and sits down, recalling Whistler's words from the past and how he left him to die. He cocks the gun and approaches Whistler, asking him how he feels. Slowly, Whistler regains his senses and starts asking questions, quickly jumping back into his work. He recounts the torture he endured while Scud, working nearby, introduces himself, confusing Whistler about his role. The two bicker over how things should be done, but their argument is cut short when unexpected visitors arrive. Armed and ready for battle, Blade and the team prepare for a fight. Suddenly, ninja-like figures silently infiltrate the facility. A flurry of gunfire erupts, but Blade soon engages them in an incredible sword fight. The skill on display is astounding, with both Blade and the masked attackers showing unmatched ability. Blade manages to land a hit on one of them but is soon met by the other, making it an uneven battle. The fight continues, with their swords clashing in a brilliant back and forth. Finally, the masked figures stop and reveal that they are not here for a fight but for a truce. They reveal themselves as Assad and Nissa, explaining that a new and dangerous enemy is rising. They tell Blade that the only way to combat this threat is to team up, as it's in their best interest to work together. Accepting, they take a chopper together and make fun of Blade, as he agreed without a plan. Blade reveals the Semtech strapped to himself, making them second-guess his ability. They arrive at a place and enter as a group, seeing the technology they have while meeting their boss, Eli. He welcomes Blade and also meets their lawyer, Carl, while thanking him for taking out Deacon, explaining the new predators at stake. Blade watches the tape of Nomak and how he has evolved over the years. The group tells Blade he needs to be stopped or else the humans will suffer at the hands of the new creation. Blade reluctantly agrees to team up with the Blood Pack, a group of elite vampires trained to kill him, consisting of Lighthammer, Verlaine, Priest, Snowman, Chupa, and Reinhardt. However, the Blood Pack members are far from happy about being led by the Daywalker they were once preparing to hunt down. Tensions run high, especially with Reinhardt, who openly challenges Blade's authority. To ensure their cooperation, Blade takes a drastic measure. He plants a silver nitrate bomb courtesy of Scud on the back of Reinhardt's head. With Blade holding the detonator, the bomb is set to explode if anyone tries to tamper with it, leaving Reinhardt with no choice but to follow Blade's lead. Joined by the vampires Assad and Nissa, the daughter of vampire overlord Damaskinos, Blade and the Blood Pack begin their hunt for Nomak, the leader of the Reapers, a new breed of vampires more dangerous than any they've faced before. They start by staking out locations where vampires are known to congregate, including blood banks and safe houses, if these spots would also attract the Reapers, who feed on vampires as well as humans. Their first target is the House of Pain, an old hotel converted into a vampire safe house. The building shelters around 200 to 300 vampires who are engaged in a wild, chaotic scene of dancing and feeding. The Blood Pack moves cautiously through the building, searching for any signs of Reapers. The group split up, attempting to find any clues, as we see Reinhardt still holding a grudge towards Blade. Nissa, on the other hand, walks through an abandoned place and sees a ladder climbing it to look for Reapers. Meanwhile, Scud sits in the van having a blast eating food whilst the group does all the heavy lifting. In the meantime, Assad spots Nomak, who vanishes like a ghost. Blade also enters a room, with Nissa finding it empty. Just before dawn, their suspicions are confirmed. Scud begins to panic when Whistler goes missing. Still searching, Nissa is grabbed by Nomak, who covers her mouth as Reapers begin emerging from the basement. And within moments, the safe house turns into a battlefield. The Reapers attack with brutal ferocity. Armed with ultraviolet guns, the Blood Pack manages to kill several Reapers, but their victory is short-lived. Despite their best efforts, the Reapers prove incredibly resilient, with Nomak himself slipping away even after being injected with EDTA, an anticoagulant designed to destroy vampires. In the chaos, Priest is bitten by one of the Reapers. Realizing that there is no cure for the Reaper bite, the Blood Pack has no choice but to leave him behind to be destroyed by the rising sunlight. Lighthammer is also bitten during the battle, but he chooses to hide his injury from the rest of the group, knowing the consequences if they find out. This first encounter with the Reapers is a harsh lesson for Blade and the Blood Pack. They quickly learn that the Reapers are impervious to their usual arsenal of silver, EDTA, and garlic. Even more terrifying, The Reapers possess the ability to heal rapidly from nearly any wound, including silver stakes driven into their hearts. Blade realizes that they are up against a far more formidable enemy than he anticipated, and the Reapers will not be easy to defeat. Meanwhile, back at the High Council, Damaskinos receives troubling news from his lawyer Conan, who informs the vampire overlord of Priest Death during the Reaper attack, and warns that the situation is becoming increasingly dangerous. He expresses concern that it's risky for Damaskinos. Outside the House of Pain, Blade arrives on the scene and assesses the Reaper they've captured throughout the situation. He theorizes that the Reaper's body, having gone several hours without feeding, has started to consume itself from the inside. The Reaper's heightened metabolism requires constant feeding, and without sustenance, they begin to deteriorate rapidly. With the Reaper on the verge of death, Nyssa seizes the opportunity to conduct an autopsy, hoping to learn more about their biology and vulnerabilities. During the autopsy, Nyssa discovers that the Reapers possess a barbed tongue that delivers a nerve toxin, paralyzing their victims while they feed. Further examination reveals that the Reapers' hearts are encased in a protective layer of bone, making it nearly impossible to pierce their hearts with a stake. This explains why traditional vampire killing methods have proven ineffective against them. The only known weakness the Reapers have is their vulnerability to sunlight and ultraviolet (UV) light. Unfortunately, these weaknesses also pose a threat to vampires, creating a significant challenge for Blade in his mission to destroy the Reapers without endangering his vampire allies. Determined to find a solution, Scud spends the rest of the night constructing UV grenades using phosphor rods, hoping they can be used to counter the Reaper threat. By morning, Blade and his team, Whistler, Nyssa, Assad, and the Blood Pack, are fully armed with UV guns, UV grenades, and large-scale UV bombs, all designed to give them the upper hand in their battle against the Reapers. With their weapons ready, the group ventures down into the sewers, splitting into 3 units to cover more ground. Whistler is paired with Chupa and Reinhardt and sent down the east tunnel. Meanwhile, Lighthammer, Verlaine, and Snowman head in the opposite direction, and Blade teams up with Assad and Nyssa. As the teams advance into the dark, dangerous sewers, tensions between the Blood Pack and Blade's allies reach a boiling point. When Chupa and Reinhardt manage to get Whistler alone, Chupa takes the opportunity to exact some revenge. He beats Whistler brutally, taunting him by saying, "We lose a partner, Blade loses one." Meanwhile, Verlaine sees a Reaper, which scares her, forcing her to climb with him close behind, to which she shines a light upon them both, killing them. Reinhardt, on the other hand, sees Reapers crawling and informs Blade, who runs to save Nyssa. Assad and Nyssa continue through the sewer, and Blade tells them get out but are attacked by Reapers, leading Blade to throw a grenade. Blade prepares his sword and kills the Reapers when the UV grenade goes off. Nyssa and Blade make a run for it whilst being chased, and this leads to Chupa being killed by them. Reinhardt unleashes havoc on them, firing and running away. He keeps shooting but is surrounded while Blade and Nyssa join the party. Blade throws a grenade, killing majority of Reapers, and continues using his gun to kill more. Unafraid, he protects his group as they head towards the exit, firing at the Reapers. Nyssa and Reinhardt use their remaining strength to hold them off, and Blade's grenades go off, blowing everyone up. Blade remains victorious as he walks down with caution, armed, still seeing the mess he made. Whistler is then confronted by Nomak, who gives him a ring to show Blade, which will help discover the real truth. Blade comes and sees Nyssa badly wounded and holds her, saddened by this. He cuts his hand, allowing her to drink from it, bringing her back to her strength as Nomak watches. Suddenly, Blade is attacked by Conan and his men, along with Reinhardt, who has betrayed them, holding on to his grudge, whilst Whistler is also captured. Meanwhile, Nyssa confronts her father, Damaskinos, asking about Blade and explaining how he saved her life. As the conversation unfolds, we see Blade and his group held captive, surrounded by guards inside a chamber. Their situation is interrupted by Damaskinos, who reveals the existence of a new mixed DNA strain, presenting the next stage of vampire evolution. Whistler, however, notices something familiar, a ring that leads him to confront Damaskinos, revealing a deeper truth. Nomak is Damaskinos' son, a revelation that leaves Nyssa shocked and confused. Suddenly, Reinhardt betrays Blade, shooting him and launching an attack. In a shocking twist, it is revealed that Scud was also working for Damaskinos all along. Scud mocks Whistler and Blade, revealing that he orchestrated the entire setup. However, Blade had anticipated this betrayal, and remotely detonates the bomb he had planted earlier, killing Scud in a swift, calculated move. Blade, weakened, is carried and placed on a table where his blood is to be harvested for the experiment. Meanwhile, Reinhardt prepares to kill Whistler, but outside the building, Nomak is seen observing the situation, waiting for his moment. Nyssa, torn between loyalty and betrayal, confronts her father, furious at being deceived her entire life. Her anger is met with violence as Damaskinos chokes and threatens her, asserting his control over the situation. Back inside, Blade remains strapped to the table, as Conan, one of Damaskinos' subordinates, interrogates him about Nomak. At that very moment, Nomak begins his assault, effortlessly cutting down multiple guards in his rage. As chaos ensues, Whistler manages to escape his restraints, taking advantage of the confusion. He attacks Reinhardt and shoots Conan, freeing Blade from his captivity. Though Blade is still unconscious, Whistler urges him to rise, trying to motivate him as the battle rages on. Meanwhile, Nomak's wrath leaves a trail of destruction, as he continues his rampage, finishing off his last victim with a roar of anger. He makes his way toward Damaskinos, who is now surrounded by guards. Despite their best efforts, Nomak overpowers them, relentlessly pursuing his father. Damaskinos barely escapes, fleeing just in time. Inside the facility, Blade and Whistler are shot at as they try to escape, causing them to fall. Blade crawls toward a chamber filled with blood but is shot again by Reinhardt, sending him into the pool of blood. Reinhardt walks away, believing Blade is finished. However, the blood rejuvenates Blade, allowing him to rise stronger than ever, fully regenerated and ready for battle. As guards rush in to confront him, Blade cracks his knuckles, signaling that the fight is far from over. With newfound strength, he begins taking out the guards one by one, displaying his incredible fighting skills. Blade uses their own weapons against them, even suplexing one through a glass barrier. His dominance in combat is clear as he mows through the opposition with ease. Finally, Blade and Reinhardt face off in an epic showdown. During the fight, Blade catches his sword in midair and uses it to finish Reinhardt, delivering a fatal blow. In a nod to the return of the unstoppable Blade, Whistler throws him his iconic sunglasses, signaling that Blade is back in full form. As Whistler shoots up the chamber, Blade stands tall, ready for whatever comes next. In the meantime, still running away, Nissa locks Damaskinos inside the building and tells him this is revenge. At the same time, Nomak arrives, finally about to take what he wants, but the father tries to manipulate him with his words, saying he will be cured. He hugs him like one of his own, but Nomak, being too smart, bites his neck, killing Damaskinos slowly and terribly. Whilst Nissa watches him breathe his last, Nissa then tells Nomak to finish it, and he begins to bite her but is stopped when Blade arrives. He dives at Nomak, stabbing him, leaving him in pain. They begin having a one-on-one, going blow for blow, trying to dominate each other. Blade is thrown around by Nomak, showing us how motivated he is as he jumps, trying to kill Blade. He holds Blade, trying to break him, but is slammed himself by Blade. He then reverses this, and they start again, fighting on their feet. Nomak throws an object at his opponent, forcing him to take a tumble, and he sees a weapon. Nomak goes to finish him off, ready to bite him, but is stopped as Blade stabs him straight through his organs, finally getting the better of him. Nomak struggles to breathe and puts himself out of his misery as he vanishes into thin air. Blade watches, and finally the battle is over and quickly holds Nissa, who is close to dying due to Nomak. Blade carries her to the rooftop to show her the beautiful view, enjoying their final moments together, while Whistler also arrives, watching them. Nissa and Blade watch the sun rise and stare at each other as she vanishes into the air, dying peacefully in Blade's arms. Somewhere in London, we see Rush the vampire attempting to have fun, only to be met by Blade, who kills him. Blade Trinity opens up in the desert, where Danica and her team of vampires carefully uncover an ancient temple, removing a hidden brick that reveals a secret passage deep within. Inside, they find 4,000-year-old writings that hint at the cradle of civilization. An ominous discovery. As they explore, a hole suddenly opens beneath them, and in a flash a hand drags one of the vampires into the darkness. The others rush to help, but find only their companion's headless body, which bursts into flames and turns to ash, leaving them in a panic. From the shadows, a vicious creature emerges, crawling out of the darkness. In the present, we see a man in a room having a debate with Dr. Edgar Vance, discussing the topic of vampires. Also sitting with them is Martin Vreed, the chief of police, who listens to Edgar talk about the human health whilst cameras are rolling. Meanwhile, in the bustling city, Blade, the legendary vampire hunter, is in the middle of an assault on a vampire-filled warehouse. As a hybrid with superhuman abilities, Blade can walk in the sunlight and resist silver, but to the public he's seen as a ruthless killer. Law enforcement is watching his every move, waiting for him to make a mistake. During the warehouse raid, Blade moves with precision, swiftly taking down vampires attempting to escape. He dodges cars and eliminates his enemies within seconds. His longtime ally, Whistler, arrives in a truck, tossing Blade his car as the hunt intensifies. Blade engages in a high-speed pursuit, chasing down two vampires on vehicles. After a thrilling chase, Blade kills both, but soon realizes he's been tricked. One of the vampires he thought was undead reveals himself to be human just before dying. Danica, who orchestrated the setup, has recorded the entire incident, framing Blade as a murderer. With the police closing in fast, Blade is forced to flee, leaving behind the evidence of the setup. Frustrated by the growing threat against him, Blade returns to his hideout. There, Whistler provides Blade with a new inhaler to make it easier for him to take the serum that suppresses his thirst for blood, ensuring he remains in control. Meanwhile, Danica sends the incriminating footage of Blade to the FBI, setting the wheels in motion for law enforcement to go after him. Back at her home, Danica and her group watch their new capture from the temple on the monitor, shocked at his abilities. She enters a hidden facility in her building, and Danica checks on the creature they've brought from the temple, a being who now calls himself Drake. As the original vampire, Drake criticizes modern vampires for their weakness. However, Danica, eager for him to lead their fight against Blade, urges him to take charge and show the world the power of the ancient vampire bloodline. In the meantime, Whistler buys a newspaper while being watched by the police. He shows Blade the paper, telling Blade he is public enemy number 1 and that he has to be careful. But Blade, unfazed, doesn't take the threat seriously. At a train station, a group of young vampires are seen having fun, being a nuisance in public, looking to feed as they're hungry. They find a young woman holding a baby and begin watching, making smart remarks. The lady heads down to take a seat in the dark alone and becomes fearful when she hears voices. The young vampires begin harassing her, thinking they've found an easy target. They snatch the baby from her arms only to discover it's a decoy. The woman reveals herself to be Abigail, a skilled vampire hunter equipped with deadly martial abilities and specialized weapons. With swift precision, Abigail takes down the vampires, turning them into ashes within moments, leaving no survivors behind. Meanwhile, back at Blade's hideout, Whistler sits alone staring at his ring while Blade meditates quietly. The FBI, tracking them down, find their location, launching a full-scale raid on the hideout. Realizing the danger, Whistler makes a heroic decision. He activates a self-destruct sequence that will wipe out all their technology, but not before engaging in a fierce shootout with the FBI agents. As the hideout explodes, Blade narrowly escapes, but law enforcement is waiting for him. Surrounded, he has no choice but to surrender. At the police station, the FBI mocks Blade, dismissing his vampire hunting mission and calling him a delusional killer. They don't believe in vampires, and Blade is treated like a madman. Dr. Edgar Vance enters the room, asking the agents to leave the room. Blade and Edgar begin talking while Edgar makes it out as if he is some sort of friend asking him questions. Blade becomes annoyed with his line of questioning, rarely answering many of his questions. As Blade is in Dr. Vance's hands now, they prepare for a mental evaluation. Dr. Vance plays his part, treating Blade like a deranged criminal. He asks Blade trivial and condescending questions to assess his sanity, all while injecting him with tranquilizers to keep him subdued. But during the evaluation, Blade makes a shocking realization that Dr. Vance is a familiar, a human serving the vampires. Vance subtly reveals a tattoo on his body, symbolizing his allegiance to a vampire leader. Blade instantly understands that the entire setup, his capture, the FBI raid, and his arrest, was orchestrated by Danica to take him out once and for all. At that moment, Danica and vampires like Jarko arrive at the station, pretending to be the transfer team for Blade. Weakened by tranquilizers, Blade is unable to defend himself. Suddenly, the window shatters as another vampire hunter, Hannibal, arrives, burning one of the vampires. Hannibal fights off several vampires as Danica escapes. Jarko pins Hannibal against the wall, but Blade uses his inhaler to recover, quickly kicking Jarko away. He joins Hannibal and, together with Abigail, revealed to be Whistler's daughter, they fight off both cops and vampires. Surrounded, Blade escapes through the ceiling while Abigail uses her weapon to clear a path through the vampires. Outside, they meet more cops, but Dex arrives to pick them up in a van. As they flee, Jarko chases after them, but Abigail shoots him with an arrow, slowing him down. Blade is taken to a new hideout where he meets Abigail's vampire hunter team, the Night Stalkers. The team includes weapons designer Hedges, blind scientist Summerfield, and her daughter Zoe. Blade begins lecturing the group, telling them they're amateurs and are not ready for this, but is stopped by Abigail, who reveals Whistler wanted this team to work with him. Blade, still not convinced, is told by Hannibal, who shares that he was once a vampire and Danica's captive until Abigail saved him and Summerfield cured him. Despite this, Blade still sees them as amateurs and is initially uninterested. In the meantime, Danica is furious that their plan failed, until Drake enters the room saying he will join the fight. Meanwhile, at the hideout, the group show videos of Danica, explaining who she is and how he got caught up with her. Abigail reveals Dracula has come back and begins showing him ancient relics and confirms the legend of Dracula, who has been alive for over 7,000 years. Throughout history, Dracula has gone by many names, but in the present day, he's known as Drake, the powerful vampire that Danica has awakened. As the original vampire, Drake possesses such immense power that even the sun doesn't affect him. While the Night Stalkers strategize their next move, Drake roams the city in broad daylight, observing how modern society has changed over the centuries. His curiosity leads him into a Gothic-themed store where he becomes disgusted by the trivialization of his legacy. The store is filled with tacky Dracula merchandise, including vampire-themed novelty items that mock his ancient lineage. Offended by the absurdity of it all, Drake hurls one of the clerks out the window and viciously feeds on the other, reminding everyone of his deadly strength. Back at the Night Stalkers' hideout, Summerfield reveals a critical development, the creation of Daystar, a biological weapon designed to eradicate vampires. The team's goal is to use Daystar to wipe out the vampire race once and for all. However, there's a problem. The virus isn't potent enough to be lethal to all vampires. To make Daystar effective, they need stronger DNA, And that's where Drake comes in. As the original vampire, Drake's blood is pure and unaffected by centuries of genetic mutations that have weakened the vampire race. Armed with this plan, Hedge equips the team with an array of new weapons, including a powerful UV arc that can instantly incinerate vampires within dense ultraviolet light. Setting out on their mission, Hannibal and Blade enter the car with Abigail ready to hunt them down. With their new weapons ready, the Night Stalkers set out to track down familiars across the city. They rough up various members of the familiar network, interrogating them and following the trail of tattoos, but none of the familiars offer useful information. After several pointless fights, Blade, Abigail, and Hannibal dangle a familiar off a bridge hoping for information. Just in time, the familiar gets a call from Vance, giving them a lead. They drop the familiar and head to Vance's office, fighting through security on each floor. When they finally reach Vance, Hannibal realizes the real Vance is dead and the imposter is Drake in disguise. Drake swiftly captures and stabs Hannibal before escaping through a window. Blade chases him across the city, crashing through buildings until they reach a rooftop where Drake reveals he has kidnapped a baby. Blade begins to talk to Drake, asking why he killed Vance and how he is able to survive the sunlight. He looks down at the people, telling Blade he is immortal and cannot be killed. Taunting Blade, Drake throws the baby, forcing Blade to catch it as Drake disappears. Abigail tends to Hannibal's wounds, urging him to stay strong while dealing with the loss of her father, Whistler. After the chaos, Blade visits Hannibal after sustaining his injury. Meanwhile, Drake returns to Danica, but instead of cooperating, he feeds on her, establishing his dominance. Later, Summerfield locates the Vampire's lab at Biomedical Enterprises, where they've been purchasing genetic materials. Blade and Abigail head to a remote warehouse, where the familiar FBI agent arrives with his vampire leader. Blade quickly kills the vampire and forces the agent to reveal the secret: a blood farming facility where humans are kept in stasis to provide vampires with an endless supply of blood. Furious, Blade kills the agent and forces the technician to shut down the facility, killing the human donors in the process. At the hideout, the team is unwinding, unaware that Whistler has entered the building. As he approaches Hannibal, confusion washes over him until Whistler grabs his face, revealing that he's Drake. Moments later, Summerfield hears a strange sound and goes to check it out. She stumbles upon a bloodied ball and tells Zoe to hide while she continues her search, unaware that she's passing by the bodies of Dex and Hedges. Suddenly, Drake finds her, and from her hiding spot, Zoe hears her mother's terrified scream. Zoe contemplates leaving her hiding place but finds Drake standing in her way. Blade and Abigail return to the hideout to a horrifying sight. Hedges, Dex, and Summerfield are dead. Summerfield's body is used as an example, with a chilling message written in her blood. Hannibal and Zoe are missing still, while Abigail cries over her friends as Blade tells her they need to go. Meanwhile, Hannibal regains consciousness, chained to the floor in the vampire's lair. They begin to beat Hannibal, demanding Blade's plans. When Hannibal refuses to cooperate, Danica threatens to turn him back into a vampire, leaving him starved until his only option is to feed on Zoe. Abigail is processing her grief by perfecting her archery skills, hitting every target with flawless precision. Blade, always alert, suddenly senses a presence in the building. It's Calder, another surviving team member. He brings a video message from Summerfield, recorded before her death. In it, she reveals that she successfully developed a functional strain of the Daystar virus, now in Calder's possession. If they can inject it into Drake, his blood will mix with the virus and kill every vampire nearby. However, there's a risk. It's unclear how the virus might affect Blade, given his hybrid nature. With time running short, Calder explains that he's only been able to create one projectile containing the virus. Abigail must make the shot count. Fortunately, the team has trackers implanted for emergencies like this, and they quickly locate Hannibal's position. Grabbing as many weapons as they can carry, Blade and Abigail head to the vampire lair. Inside, Hannibal continues to endure brutal beatings from Danica and Jarko, refusing to reveal Blade's plans. Suddenly, the vampires start coughing and disintegrating into ash. Abigail has infused the air conditioning system with liquid silver. With the vampires weakened, Blade crashes through the skylight and launches into a fierce battle, dispatching vampires left and right with specialized weapons. Abigail meanwhile rescues Hannibal and joins the fray, taking down more guards. As Blade cuts through the remaining vampires with ease, burning them with his weapons, Abigail searches for Zoe amidst the chaos. After eliminating several vampires, she finally locates Zoe. But just as she does, a vampire grabs Abigail from behind. Reacting quickly, she uses her UV arc to incinerate him. Meanwhile, Hannibal regains his gear and tries to rejoin the fight, only to encounter a pack of vampire dogs. Without hesitation, he makes a daring leap, tricking the dogs into following him out of a window, sending them plummeting to their doom. As Hannibal attempts to escape, he stumbles back into his cell, only to be confronted by Jarko. The two engage in a brutal struggle, with Jarko gaining the upper hand. Just when it seems like Hannibal is defeated, Jarko moves in for a bite, but Hannibal shoves an explosive into his mouth, causing Jarko to burn away to ash. Meanwhile, Blade finally finds Drake and the two engage in a fierce sword fight. Their skills are evenly matched, with both exchanging powerful blows, neither one able to gain the upper hand. As the clash rages on, a few vampires try to intervene and shoot at Blade, but Abigail swiftly takes them out with her expert marksmanship, using her weapon to deadly effect. Danica then joins the battle, firing a gun at Blade, but Hannibal tackles her. In the midst of the chaos, Blade delivers a powerful kick, sending Drake crashing through a window. After a long leap, both combatants drop their swords, continuing the battle with their bare hands. Drake taps into his immense strength, slamming Blade into the ground repeatedly and beginning to transform into his monstrous true form. Despite Blade's powerful kicks and punches, Drake's overwhelming strength starts to turn the tide against him. Just as Drake retrieves his sword, ready to deliver a killing blow, Abigail fires the virus-tipped arrow at him. In a display of speed, Drake catches the arrow mid-air and drops it. Abigail quickly distracts him with a volley of arrows, giving Blade the critical moment he needs. Seizing the opportunity, Blade grabs the dropped arrow containing the Daystar virus and injects it directly into Drake. Drake roars in agony as the virus courses through his body. His blood becomes a carrier for the Daystar virus, spreading throughout the building and killing every vampire inside, including Danica, who disintegrates into ash. Drake's monstrous form recedes, returning him to his human appearance. In his final moments, Drake praises Blade for his honor, acknowledging the strength of his opponent before dying. Shortly after, FBI agents storm the building, finding it in ruins with the bodies of the vampires turned to ash, and only Blade's lifeless form remaining. They believe they have captured the notorious hunter and prepare to perform an autopsy on him. However, Blade suddenly awakens, fully recovered. Blade breaks free from the facility, fighting his way through the agents and making a daring escape on a motorcycle. With the virus having decimated the vampire ranks and Drake defeated, Blade prepares for the next battle, ready for whatever his next mission may bring.